All right, so I found out last time, this was quite interesting for me, but I found out last time that an hour is not really a lot of time to get done what I'd really like to get done. So possibly through the course of today, because this is the intermittent formula writing, so we may not get to pivot tables. If that's the case, I will make sure that we do a pivot table class specifically for itself. So that will that'll get us some training on that. I'm going to try to keep look at the chat, and I know Crystal really helps me with doing that. So if you guys have any questions, interrupt me. I will keep you on the right hand side of my screen, your wonderful faces, just in case you have a question or anything. But with that being said, we'll jump right in. So the formulas that we want to talk about first are summing and basic counting. So I created a spreadsheet that I hope you can see now a little bit closer, that we can do a couple formulas in these input boxes that will allow us to do some counting based on the data that's in a certain number, a certain range. So what I did was create a fake spreadsheet for A and B columns of just things that you may see in a spreadsheet. And I want to give you a couple formulas on how you can count the total blank cells, or how many cells are actually in a range that you want to use. How many non-blank cells, numeric values, are there any errors in your spreadsheets? I know that some of you probably have seen these little nasty errors before on your spreadsheet. So if you're working with thousands and thousands of rows, or hundreds of rows, or even 25 rows, having to go back and forth and looking at all these errors sometimes becomes trouble. So I want to show you some formulas that will count some basic things for you. So the first one that I want to show you is the total sales. Now, as we learned in the previous formula class, all formulas begin with a what?
Equal sign.
An equal sign. Absolutely. So anytime you're starting with a formula, make sure you put the equal sign. If not, Excel is just going to recognize it as text or values. So I'm going to hit the equal sign, and I'm going to start typing the function called rows. Okay, ROWS. All right. Now, once I open the parentheses to start my argument, what I've done, and I'll show you this in just a second, I have actually named my range of data in this spreadsheet, and you'll see that throughout what I've done. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. But for a shortcut here, I have named the range between A2 or A1 and A10 data. Right? So I'm just going to start typing the word data, and you'll notice the data tag coming up that tells you that I can use that in a formula. So rows data, and you'll notice it highlights in blue to tell me that it is A1 through A10. So I'll show you how to name those in just a second. But I say rows data, all right, and then I close my parentheses. That's the syntax for the first one. Does anybody remember what the multiplication operator is? Uh-oh. Okay, I think Sandy said asterisk, and Marie, you said?
The star thing.
The star thing, yes. So it's the asterisk. So it's on the 8 key, the star thing. I kind of like that better. So I'm going to do rows, the data, multiplied by the columns data. So I'm going to type in the word columns and open my argument. And then again, my range or my array of this is called data. I could also type A1 colon B10 if I chose to. So I'm going to hit data. And when I hit enter to enter my formula, it's going to count the rows and the columns and give me a total that there are 20 cells within this range of data. Okay, so just to show you really quickly that, you don't have to use data as the name range. So if I literally said rows A1 through B10, as we did last time in our session, the star thingy, as Marie calls it, which I love, columns, all right, and then A1 through B10. And then I close my argument, you'll notice I get the exact same thing. So all I've done to make a shortcut in this is just name the range of data previously. There's a question, does it matter if things are capped or lowercase? No, ma'am, it does not. All right. So what I want to show you before we continue with this is how to name a range of cells, right? So if you remember in my previous session, the box that is toward the left of the formula bar is known as the name box. Typically, it lists the cell address, which is the intersection between a column and a row. So cell C2 is here, and it will list C2 in the name box. If I highlight cells A1 through B10, you'll notice that my name changes to data over here because I have previously named this range of cells. How do we
show that?
where do
Where,
I say that again?
where do you see the, oh, there it is in that little tiny
Yep,
box.
that little tiny box. I'll move it over a little bit and you can see it. It's right here. So that's called your name box. And if you highlight the cells A1 through A10, I have named them data.
Oh, you
How do I name a range of cells? Once you name a range of cells, you can use it in a formula, right? As we saw previously, I say rows data, which means use whatever those named ranges are inside of a formula. So if I wanted to name, let's say cells G1 through G10, I can do that by highlighting the cells first, going up to the formulas tab, and looking at the section that says define names, and I can click on define name. And I'll get a little box that pops up, my little define name dialog box. And I'll name it, you can name it 255 characters, but there cannot be any spaces in the name. So if you name it tax rate, you have to put TAXRATE all together as one word. So it's like naming something in like a database. You can't have spaces, but you can use 255 characters. I don't know why in the world you would use that many, but you are welcome to do that if you choose. So I'm just going to call it test data. All right, one word. That's what you're going to name the range of cells. The next option is the scope of that range. So do you want this range to only be in the sheet that you've actually selected, the entire workbook, or in a different sheet that is open in this workbook? So you can choose, it'll apply to all sheets in the workbook or a specific sheet that you select. I'm going to leave it as the broad category of the workbook so I can use it in multiple sheets. You also have the ability to write a comment, maybe used to calculate the rate of tax, I'll say. What the comment is that it will allow people that do not have the ability to create this spreadsheet to open this dialog box and maybe view the names that you have put on ranges of data in your spreadsheet. So if you're the creator of the spreadsheet and you want to make sure the users know what they're looking at, use a comment to make sure that that information is known. And the very bottom, the last thing is what this name refers to. And since we highlighted cells G1 through G10 already, it went ahead and put the cells information in this dialog box. If you had not highlighted that previously, what you could do is just click this little blue arrow box here, and then it would allow you to select a range, and it will just go ahead and write it in for you. You see as it's writing it. So you can click that and create the range yourself, and then just click the box again. So it types in the range for you. Once you have done that, you hit OK. And then if you want to use test data inside of a formula, I'll just say average test, and you'll see that test data pops up for me to be able to use that in the calculated formula. If you wanted to see the names of the data sets in your spreadsheet, like I've created this spreadsheet. So if you guys wanted to look at the data, you would select, instead of define name, you would select name manager. And the name manager would show you all of the cells that have been named inside this spreadsheet. So what I've used is names, the values that they apply to, what sheet or workbook that it refers to, and then the scope of that. Either it's on the same page or it's in the entire workbook. So you would be able to see all of the name ranges that someone else has created. So it's just my little tidbit as we use these little shortcuts so you're not left in the dark. The next thing that I want to do is I want to calculate the number of blank cells in this data range, right? I don't want to have to go through and count them myself. So how do I get to the blank cells? Well, there is a formula and function that you can use called count blank. Okay, so count blank, one word. Wendy says, so you can save all of the names with ranges and use them on all of the spreadsheets. Yes, absolutely. And again, if you don't catch it during this class, you're welcome to contact me afterwards and I can walk you through it. We'll get on a Zoom call or whatever you need and we'll walk through that. So blank cells, how do I count the blank cells? So we use the function called count blank. And in this particular situation, I want to also use the option of inserting the formula another way. I have used Excel many times and I'm pretty good at it. And so I know the formulas kind of by heart. But if you did not, if you remember our previous class, we talked about the insert function formula, insert function command button that is found on the formula tab that will help you do this. So this time I want to use the insert function. So we go to the formula tab. After we've clicked on the cell, we go to the formula tab and insert function. And we get the insert function dialog box that we saw in our last session. I want to do blank cells. So I'm just going to type in blank cells as my search function, right? And when I hit go, it will give me functions that it thinks that I might want to use, right? So when I click on count blank, it tells me that it counts the number of empty cells in a specified range. So yes, that's the one I want to use. So I'm going to click on that and hit OK. Once you choose your function, it opens the function dialog box. So the reason why I'm showing you this is because it's really going to walk you through how to insert a function and what arguments are necessary to get you your answer. So this is the count blank function. It counts the number of empty cells in a specified range. So we're looking at blank cells. And my only argument in this is the range, which it gives you the definition of what a range is. It's the range from which you want to count the empty cells. And we know that a range of cells is just a group of cells, right? So all I have to do is one of two things. I can either click this blue box and highlight my range of cells. And of course, it inserts the name data because I've already named it. And I've inserted my argument, or I could have just typed data inside that range. Notice that it gives you the result of your formula here. And it also gives you a hyperlink to open the help command if you're not familiar with these formulas or functions and you want a little bit more help to guide you through it. Once you hit OK, it will tell me that there are 6 blank cells within this range of data. Right. So the way that I teach people is that the way you would use this is if you're one of the people that looks at a range of data or spreadsheets that you do at work, and you want to make sure that there's a number in every single cell, this is a quick way to tell you that there are blank cells in this spreadsheet. Once you know that there are blank cells in the spreadsheet, what I typically do is go to the header of my column. I hit Control Shift and L.
Oh,
which turns on my filtering. So Control Shift L, or on the Home tab, you can just go to the Sort and Filter command button and select Filter. I like keyboard shortcuts, so I do Control Shift L. And now I have the ability to filter this spreadsheet and I can choose blank cells or not. So that's what I would do to be able to use this formula. All right, what about non-blank cells? So I've counted the non-blank cells. What if I actually want to count the cells that actually are not empty, right? Well, the function for this is count A. So we've got count blank for blank cells, count A for non-blank cells. So equals count A and then open parentheses to start my argument. Now, another way to read the syntax of a formula is notice that at the very bottom, when I start to write this function, it gives me the syntax. All it's saying is count what? What's my value? Well, as we know, our range of cells is called data. So I'm going to insert data. and I'm going to close my parentheses and hit the enter icon. And now my answer is 14. Okay, so again, count blank is to count the blank cells. Count A or counta is the non-blank cells. Well, what now about numeric values, right? I want to count the number values in my cells, not the text, the numbers, right? I want to look at the numbers. So I can use a formula that's called just count. Okay, so count blank is empty cells. Count A is non-blank
Travis,
cells.
how long is the meeting? Do you know?
And count, C-O-N-T, just the word count, counts the numeric values, not the text, but the numeric values. So I'm just going to click enter, count, open parentheses, and again, use my range. If I want to highlight it, I can. Close my parentheses and hit enter. And that is telling me that within this range of cells, there are 7 of them that have numbers in them. All right. So now we want to look at some errors. All right. So I'm going to tell you a function called Countifs. All right. So think of it as a logical formula that's going to give you an answer to something if something matters, right? So Countifs. So let's look at the NA errors in this spreadsheet. All right. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to equal sign, count if, open my parentheses. And now my syntax of my formula here is telling me that your first variable should be your range, and then their next variable should be your criteria. For all of those who are working on terminology, range means a set of cells, and criteria just means what I'm looking at, like a condition. All right. So my range of cells again is data. All right. And I need to separate my argument, as you can see, by a comma. So my range of cells is data. So what's my criteria? Well, my criteria is I'm looking for the error £n/A. If I am typing text in a formula, I need to put quotations around it. So the way I'm going to write this is quotations in, or pound, I'm sorry, hashtag N/A close quotations, because hashtag N/A is a textual value. It has nothing to do with variables like numbers. So I have to put those in quotations. So my formula reads equals count if, and your open parentheses to start your argument, data, which is my range of cells, A1 through B10, comma to separate the argument. If you remember in my last session, a comma can mean and or a separation of arguments. And then you put your criteria, which I'm looking for the error of hashtag NA. And I put that in quotations because that's a text that I'm putting in a formula. So I need to make sure I put that in quotations. Once I'm done with my formula, I put an end parentheses, and then I hit enter. And there are no errors of NA in my range. All right. So the same thing works for all the rest of the formulas. I just want to show you one that actually has a count. So since we know there's a name error here, let's do the name formula. So all of these formulas work exactly the same, except you would instead of in the parentheses, instead of putting hashtag NA, you would put hashtag null exclamation or hashtag divide/0. You would just write what you're finding. So let me just go ahead and do the name error here, because I know there's a count of 1 here. So it's going to be equals count if, open parentheses, your range of cells, and this time I'll put the range as numbers instead of the data name. And then now I'm looking for the name error. So I'm going to put quotations, hashtag name, question mark, close quotations, because that's what I'm looking for. And then I hit enter, and you can see that there is a 1. There is 1 error of name in my cells. All right. Are there any questions on the count kind of formulas to how to count certain things? So count blank is blank cells, Count A is non-blank cells. Count counts the numbers in a cell. And then of course your count if allows you to look at a range and count it if it meets a certain criteria. All right, with that being said, all right, let's see what. I'm still clueless on Excel too, Marie. You ain't got nothing to worry about. So under our multiple criteria, I want to do a couple that are going to count things throughout a list of cells, right? So as we saw in the count if, so we're going to move to that multiple criteria counting spreadsheet. And what we saw was in the previous one, we used, I'm with Marie. We saw the count if, no S, right? Count if gave you the ability to look at a range of cell and count them if it met one criteria, right? The hashtag NA, the error that we were looking for, or maybe the name Richard, whatever that one criteria is. But what if you want to count cells that meet multiple criterias, right? What if I want to say I want it to be greater than 100 or less than or equal to 200? How do I do that with multiple criteria? Well, there's a simple way. Instead of using count if, you're going to use what's called Countifs with an S. So anytime you see that S on the end of that, that means there's multiple criteria being selected. So in this box, if we wanted to use the insert function to learn this argument, we could. I'm going to type it in and then we'll learn the insert function. So in my cell, I'm going to say I want to count the amounts that are greater than 100 and less than or equal to 200. All right, so I start every formula with an equal sign, and I know that my function is going to be Countifs, right? We're going to do Countifs, and let me do this and make it a little bit bigger for you guys. All right, so Countifs and open parentheses. So the first argument here is my criteria range 1. So what am I looking at? What is my range of data that I'm looking at? So my shortcut for this was I named my cells D2 through D27 as amount. So I use the name manager to say amount. So all I have to do is type amount, right? Well, let me do this. Let me do amount in the spreadsheet. All right, so it's in the worksheet. All right, so amount, and it is a comma, and then my first criteria. So it's the range of data, and then the first criteria. Now let me back up a second and show you that you actually can just select this range if you wanted to, and it would put the information in there, right? So again, select, type, whatever works best for you. That's your range that you're looking at. Then I put a comma, and now I'm giving you my criteria for that range. So my criteria would be that I need to look at the amounts that are greater than 100. And since I'm using a text symbol with that 100, I need to put it in quotations. So quotations, the greater than symbol, and then 100. End quotations. So I've got my formula or my function, the criteria range 1, which is D2 through D27. My criteria 1, which is to be greater than 100. And then I put another comma to separate for the next argument. So now it's asking me for my criteria range 2. Since it's the same range, all I got to do is highlight again. All right, so I'm looking at the same range. I'm going to put a comma, and then it's asking me for what's your second criteria. Well, my second criteria is that it be less than or equal to 200. So again, since I'm using textual alphabetic characters here instead of just numbers, I put those in quotations. So it's less than symbol, equal to 200, and quotations. And as you can see, you can continue with your criteria. It don't have to be just 2. You can have multiple criterias, 20, 25, 60, however many you want. You can continue adding criteria. But for this example, we just used 2. Once I'm done, I close my parentheses. So my formula is the function of Countifs. I'm looking at for the first criteria, I'm looking at the range of amount, which is D2 through D27. And I'm looking for any variable that is greater than 100. For my second criteria, I'm looking at the same range of D2 through D100 or D27. And I'm looking at any variable that is less than or equal to 200. Once I'm done with that formula, I hit enter, and it counts that there are 4 values within that range of cells that meet the criteria of being greater than 100 or less than and equal to 200. Does that make sense to everyone? I'm so glad, because I was a little worried. We're getting good here. All right, so now let's do it again. Let's count the number of sales that meet all of the following criteria. The month is January, the sales rep is Brooks, and the amount is greater than 1,000, right? So now I'm using multiple criteria, same formula and function, Countifs. So again, we're going to do Countifs. My first criteria that I'm looking at is the range that is in the month, right? Because I'm looking for the month to be equal to January, right? So again, I've just named these ranges the title of the column. So cells D2 or A2 through A27 is going to be called month. Again, you can highlight or type the word month. And I'm going to do a comma, and then it's saying in that range, what do you want me to look for? Well, I'm looking for the word January. So in quotations, I'm just going to type January, end quotations. Then I'm going to do a comma to move to my next criteria. So my next criteria is that my sales representative has to be Brooks, right? So same range, or not same range, this is a different range. So I've named this section in column B as sales rep. So you can either highlight B2 through B27 or type in sales rep. I'm going to do a comma, and the criteria that I'm looking for in this range of sales is the word Brooks. So quotation, Brooks, quotation. And then my last criteria would be a comma, and my last criteria is that the amount is greater than 1,000. So now I'm looking in the amount column, which is D2 through D27. So I'll highlight that, or you can type in the word amount, either one, since I've named the range. Put in a comma, and now I'm looking at anything that is greater than 1,000. So quotations, greater than symbol, 1,000, end quotations. And now that I'm finished with my formula, I can close the parentheses, and I'll hit the enter key, and you can see that in this range, in this table, there are 2 rows that meet the value of being the month of January, the sales rep is Brooks, and the amount is greater than 1,000. Any questions? All right, I'm just looking at the chat box just to be sure. All right, so now we're going to move to the Sumifs tab. And again, I've named these cell ranges invoice, num, office, amount, just the title of the column to make it simple. And so I want to just do a couple of these to give you a kind of a familiarity with it. I'm just going to work with Sumif and Sumifs, which is looking at one criteria versus 2 or 3 or more. And I'm just going to add things up, right? Because sum means addition. So it's going to work the same way as the count formula, Countifs, but it's just doing sums instead of counting. So I want to look at the total past due days. So what I've done in this spreadsheet is just do a calculation that in this column is just going to be D2, which is the due date or the date due, minus the today formula, which is today's date. And I just typed in days, or I can use formulas, and I just made it a difference. So that means if in May, this person, the due date's the 24th, today is the 5th, they have 19 days to pay, or 19 days to turn a book in, or 19 days to come into a case manager, whatever you want to say. And the ones above that are past due. So this is past due 34 days. This is past due 64 days, etc. Right? So if I'm a manager of a department, I might say, I want to see what the total number of past due days is to kind of look at my team and see what we're doing, right? So I'm going to write a sum if formulas to make that happen. I'm going to look at cell A15 and I'm going to type the equal sign, and I'm going to do the function sum if, because I'm only looking at one criteria. I'm just looking to make sure those numbers are less than 0, right? Because if you get a negative number, that means they're past due. If it's a positive number, they're on time, right? They've not paid yet. So anything that's less than 0 is what I need to add up. So I'm going to do my sum if formula, open it, and look at a range. Well, I'm looking at the range that is in the column of difference, right? I'm looking at the days. Are they past due? So my range is F2 through F11, or difference as I called it. I'm going to put a comma. And then I'm going to say my criteria is quotations that it has to be less than 0, end quotations, and then close my argument. So I'm looking at the difference column for anything that is less than 0 and sum that. And I now have a total of 63 days that have passed due. So that's a good totality for me to look at to see if that works. Okay. I want to look at the last one on here because, again, all of these formulas work the same. I just want to do a couple for you so that you kind of get familiar with count and sums. So I want to look at the total past due amount for anything that is listed in the Oregon office, right? So I have a couple of criteria. I have 2. All right, so let's see how we're going to do this. All right. So I want to do it this way. I want to do it. Oh, no. I want to do it with the sum function, insert function. So because it's multiple criteria, I'm going to do this so you can see some of the arguments. So I know it's the sum if with an S because it's multiple criteria, more than one, and we need to add them up. So let's look at the arguments that we're looking at. So this sum if function adds the cells specified by a given set of conditions or criteria. All right, so I'm looking at the range. It's the actual cells to sum. So what cells would I sum when this is all over with? Well, I'm looking at the total past due amount. So I'm going to sum the amount, right? So it's going to be the cell range C2 through C11. That is going to be the range that I want to add. Then I move to criteria range 1, which is the range of cells you want to evaluate for a condition. Well, I'm looking at the total past due amount for Oregon. So I need to see what's past due. So I'm going to look in the difference column, right? F2 through F11 for the criteria of anything that is less than 0. All right, and notice because I'm using the argument box here, I don't have to put the quotations around it because it'll do that for me. The next criteria that I'm looking at is it has to be from the office of Oregon, right? It has to be located in Oregon. So I'm looking at the office range this time in B2 through B11 for the criteria of Oregon. And again, I don't have to put quotations around it. It will do that for me. And once I've done that, I've done everything. I want it to sum the amounts that are due, that are past due, located in the office of Oregon. My answer is $5,250. And you'll notice that it gives me that amount here. All right, so before we move on to the next part of this class, are there any questions on counting or summing with conditions or multiple criteria? All right, so now I'm going to move to Fabricam alarm codes spreadsheet, and I want to teach you some. So now we learned some formulas that count and sum. I want to teach you some formulas that manipulate text. All right. So let's say you are working with a database and you get this spreadsheet. Okay. All the time we get spreadsheets with string of text and all this stuff that comes out of databases that we have to format and manipulate. I'm going to teach you some easy ways to do that. So in this particular data sheet, under the column A of extension code employee ID, there are several things here. There's the extension for the person. There is the floor number for the person, which is the first number, and I've made all this up, by the way. There is also the employee categories, which are these 4 letters in the middle, and then the employee ID number, which are the last numbers here, right? So how do I get those into different cells without having to go through every single one of these and look at it, right? This is how we do it. And I made it simple in an 8 row spreadsheet, but I know that you guys might be working with hundreds of rows, right? So in the extension column, we're going to use a function called left. And what left does is return a string of text or a certain number of letters or numbers from the left side of a string of text, however many that you tell it to bring in. So I know that the extension code for this person is the first 3 numbers of this string of text. So I'm going to enter the equal sign and the left function. And of course, the open parentheses to work with my arguments. And then the syntax for this is it just says, what text are you wanting me to look at? And how many number of characters do you want me to pull? That's all. So we know that the number of text or the text that we want it to look at is located in cell A2. We do a comma to signify that we're moving to the next argument. And the next argument is how many characters do you want me to pull in? Well, I want you to pull in the first 3. So I type in 3. So again, left side of the string of text, what string of text am I looking at? And how many do you want me to bring back? I want you to look at text A2 and I want you to bring back 3 characters from the left side of that string. I close my parentheses and I hit enter and it brings back 425. All right, since I want to do the same thing in all of these, I just grab that little fill arrow at the right-hand side of the cell, click and drag it and pull it all the way down and it copies the formula down. All right, I see somebody popped a text in. Let me look at that. Cool. All right, let's do the same thing so you get kind of a little repeat of this. The floor number is just the first digit of the extension, right? So I'm going to do the left function again, and I'm going to look at the same string of text, A2, comma, but this time I only want to bring back the first text, right? The first number. So I'm just going to do 1 instead of 3. Close it and hit enter, and we've got the number 4. We've got the first letter or number in that string of text. And again, we can copy that down and it pulls all of the first numbers for that string of text. Am I blowing your mind yet? All right, so now let's look at the birthday. All right, so now I want to look at the birthday. Well, this time we're going to look at a different string of text. This time we're going to look at the string of text in E2. So we're looking at the alarm string, right? And the date of birth or the birthday month is the last 3 letters of this string of text. So you'll see April, March, August, December, July, right? So I want to pull their date of their birthday month over to this column. But on this particular one, it's not from the left-hand side, it's from the right-hand side. So what do you think the function is this time? Yeah, I see Wendy mouthing right. Yes, it's from the right-hand side. So I'm going to equal right, open parentheses. And then I'm just going to do again, what is the text I'm looking at? It's found in E2, comma, and then the number of characters you want me to pull. So I know it's going to be the last 3. So go in 3 characters, right? Close parentheses and equals. And now it has pulled the birthday month. And then I'll drag that down and it will pull all of them for me. All right, now let's do it with the employee ID one more time so you kind of get the feel of it. So it's the right side of the text. What text am I looking at and how many characters do you want me to go into, right? So the employee ID is going to equal the right function, open parentheses. I'm going to look at the A2 string of text because it's the last numbers here. And I want you to go in 5, right? So comma 5. I know that 5 is the employee ID. Close parentheses and equals or enter. And I drag that down and now I have their employee ID number. All right, so now I've done the first and the left and right side, but what if it's in the middle? Like, how do I do it if it's in the middle? There's a function called mid, M-I-D, all right? And that is to pull string of text from the middle of a string. So the employee category 1 is going to be the first 2 letters after the extension code, right? So it's OO and SA and SA, SP, SA, OO, right? So how do I get it from the middle? Well, the middle function, the MID function, has 3 arguments. So the other 2 was only what text do you want me to look at and how many do you want me to pull. This one is going to say, what string of text do you want me to look at? Where do I start? And how many do you want me to pull? Because it's in the middle of the string of text, you have to tell it where to start, right? So this time we're going to do equals MID, open parentheses. And we're going to say, okay, I want you to look at A2, which is the string of text, comma, what number or character do I start at? So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So you start at the 4th character and you pull these 2. So I want it to pull 2 characters from that 4th character. So again, A2, comma, 4, comma 2. What string of text am I looking at? Where do I start? And how many do I pull? I'm going to close my argument and hit enter, and it will pull those characters. And again, I can drag that down. All right, let's do it one more time. To repetition creates a memory. So equals mid. So the employee category 2 is the next 2 letters. So mid, open parentheses. The text again is in A2, comma. What number do we start at? It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 this time. So it's the 6th character that you start at, comma. And again, we want it to pull 2 of those characters. Close the parentheses and enter, and it pulls the next 2. Now, here's a wonderful trick that I'm going to try to increase this so you can see it. All right, so in this first and last name, if you'll notice, there is actually a space before every single name, right? When people enter data into a database, sometimes people make boo-boos. Okay, they put a space before something that they don't need to. The problem with this is that it messes up your sorting and your sorting of your spreadsheet alphabetically. So let me give you an example. If I remove the space from Ryan and Calfado, right? You see the difference? It's more flush to the left. If I was to filter this by A to Z, notice that it stays the same. But if I do it Z to A, that's not in alphabetical order, right? Because a space is considered a character. And it falls at the top of the alphabetic list. So if all of these were different, I would have a problem in sorting and functioning, right? So let me undo all of that and go back to the original. So how we solve that is a formula or a function called trim. Trim will trim the blank spaces before and after a string of text, right? So let me hit equals trim, open parentheses. And I want it to trim the first name column, which is B2. Type a comma or not a comma. This time the only syntax is what text you want me to look at, right? There's only one argument. So I close my parentheses. I just want it to look at the text in B2. and now it has trimmed the space before David's name. So when I copy that down, all of them are now trimmed.
Does it only trim one space?
It trims any space that is before or after, so at the beginning and the end. So if you have 2 spaces, it will trim that as well. So it trims before and after if there's a space. All right, and the last thing I want to show you is down here at the bottom, I created another little chart, but notice that the name is not in proper case. There's no first, it's not capitalized. So you actually can do that with a formula as well. It's called proper. So we equal proper, and we'd say what text do you want to make proper. I want to do N2, and I close my parentheses, and again I hit OK, and it capitalizes David's name. All right, so if I copy that down, you'll notice that it does all of them the same way. Well, does anybody have any questions so far? I really wanted to get to index lookups. We have 10 minutes left. What do you guys want to do? Do you want to try to do this, or do you want to stop for questions and answers?
I'm lost. I feel like I've gone from intro to Excel right into the doctoral program.
I'm telling you, it's a beast. It's really a beast. And this is not even the advanced ones. So if you guys, if we, an hour is a lot, to cover, we know that. So if you want to, do this again, we can do this again. It's not, we're not dead. I promise. We'll continue doing this. But I do want to show you one formula because Maria actually brought it up. So let's move to the intro example, and this will be our last one for this class. And I will make sure that we schedule another intermediate, and we'll go through this again because, again, Excel is harder to learn. So I got that. So in this particular example, what I want to do is do a lookup formula. So think about having a database of information. So I created an employee database for first name, last name, what department they're in, what's their extension, what date they were hired, etc. And let's imagine that we have 1,000 employees in our business, and all of them are listed in this spreadsheet. But I want to be able to look up a person's name without doing all these filterings. I want to pull all their information. I want to do all that from the spreadsheet by just typing in their last name, right? So I can do what's called a Vlookup. And what a Vlookup does is it only works with vertical data. So that's up and down. You also have an HLOOKUP. So if your table is left to right, you can use HLOOKUP. Again, we'll do this class again, and we'll do this, again and again until we get it. But a Vlookup works with vertical data up and down. So this chart is listed up and down, and it will pull from that range of data what you're looking at, right? All right, so what I'm going to do is type in, so cell C2 is where I want to be able to type the person's last name and all of their information pop up, right? So that is going to be my lookup cell. So in the first name, I want to type equals Vlookup. All right. And so it's going to ask me what my lookup value is. So what am I looking up in this table? And it's always going to refer to C2 because if I change that name, it's going to change that, right? So C2 is my lookup value. Remember in our last course, we talked about absolute cell references, cells that never, the cell that never changes. This is one of those cells. This will always be our lookup cell. So I'm going to make that an absolute reference by putting $signs in front of it. $C, $2. So whenever I copy this, it will never copy differently, right? So that's my lookup value. It's whatever's in here I want you to look up in this table, comma, to move to my next argument. My next argument is what is the table array? So what is the range of data I'm looking at? Well, I'm looking at emp data. So emp data is all of this table. I'm sorry, I started here. So emp data, right? Employee data is what I named it. And it cells A or C7 through G16. It's that table of data. So whatever your table is, you highlight all of that. You're looking in that table. So you're going to tell it what to look for and where to look. And then the next one is what column are you looking in to pull this data? So again, this is first name, so it's going to be column 2 of my table, right? So I type in a 2. And then the lookup range, so comma, lookup range. So now it's going to ask me, do I want it to be an exact match or an approximate match? So if I type the word true, that's an approximate match. That means that the values in the first column can be sorted. That might be different. It might be close to the match, etc. In my case, I want an exact match because I'm looking up an employee, right? So if your last name is Vance, I want to look up you. I want it to be exact. So I'm going to type false. All right, so let's look at what I did one more time. I did Vlookup. What is the lookup value that I'm looking at? So it's going to be whatever I type in this cell, C2. Where am I looking at in this whole table? What column am I looking in? Since it's the first name I'm pulling, it's column 2. And then false because I want it to be an exact match. I don't want to pull possibilities, right? I want it to be exact. And then I close my parentheses and I hit enter, and that right now it's NA because I don't type anything. So let's pull Alan. Notice when I type in Alan, it pulls Yolanda as the first name. If I was to type in Endow, it would pull Ed as the first name. All right, so now I'm going to copy this formula over by dragging. And then I'm just going to change the column that it's referring to, right? So again, because I made that cell C2 an absolute reference, when I pull it over, it doesn't move to cell C3, C4, etc. It stays at cell C2. So I'm going to drag my formula over. And now I'm going to double click in this one and say department is column 3. So I'm going to change 2 to 3 and then hit enter. I'm going to change this one from 2 to 4 because the extension is in column 4. And I'm going to change this one to column 5 because their hire date is in column 5, right? And then I'll change it to a date format. So now, anytime I change this one, it will pull the rest of their data. So let's look at Baker. And now it changes to Nancy Baker. So if you had 1,000 records to look at, you could pull Steve Hayes and it would pull all information associated with Steve. Right? Again, I'll change that to Davis. And now it pulls Rita, administration, the extension, and the date she was hired. All right. So we will stop there. I will make sure that, again, this is a lot of stuff. I know, Sandy, my brain's blowing too. It's a lot of stuff to take in. It's a humongous thing. I'm glad they're recording it for you so you can kind of go back. We'll reschedule this because Stephen, Crystal, and I were talking prior to the call that we would, look at the month of September. So maybe just one Excel class in September with some other stuff, and I'll make sure it's an intermediate formula class again. And we'll go through this same spreadsheet and we'll do a little bit more and a little bit more to make sure you're comfortable. But I'd like to give just the last couple minutes. We started a few minutes late, so maybe we can stay a few minutes. Do you guys have any questions, any comments, anything? Thank
Richard,
you.
I just want to do a brain dump from your brain into mine, because this is just like, I had no idea how people did this magic in Excel, and I'm so psyched that I can now do something that makes me look like I'm smart. This is great. I love it.
Yes.
Thank you. You're a good teacher too. Thank you so much for this.
And I also want to encourage you guys that the more you learn the terminology, right? So use that insert function dialog box, because it's going to give you the definition. It's going to give you what it's looking for. The more you learn this terminology, what a range is, what a sum criteria is, what a sum range is, the more you learn this, the more that you can just go to Google and type in, like, show me the formula for Sumif, and you can start following it and you'll be like, ah, that's what it's asking for. Boom, 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 we're done, right? I do that all the time. There are things that I'm still learning sometimes because it grows and grows and grows. So I'll Google it and I'll be like, oh, it's talking about the index match formula. Perfect. We'll do that. And the more powerful, so Marie, and Sandy's about to do this again, but Marie, you're really going to get it. But it's called nesting. So I actually can say, I can nest a function within a function within a function within a function. So let's say that, your criteria that we talked about earlier, the criteria for what cells you want to sum, we said, look for something that's greater than 100. You actually could said sum this column if this logical test is met, if this meets this, and it's like a formula that's 500 characters long, and it does this amazing calculation that you don't have to worry about anymore, right? It automatically does it in your spreadsheet. So again, it's a lot more powerful than just this. And I'm hoping through these trainings, because you guys are nonprofits and you do this stuff all the time, and you probably do it manually, and we can make these spreadsheets work amazingly for you through these trainings. So baby steps, we'll get there.
Wow.
Wow. Richard, thank you so much. We appreciate this. I have homework to do, and when the recordings are available, and thank you, Crystal, for that. And we appreciate you being with us today. Thank you so much. We'll see you same time next week. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.